and welcome to the Windows Virtual Desktop session for SMBs. My name is David Bierman-Burr with Microsoft. I spend a lot of time working with partners and our distributors, and we recently introduced Windows Virtual Desktop Value into our SMB Premium SKU, or Microsoft 365 Business Premium. And I was super impressed with Nerdio's ability to make it simple for partners to get up and running quickly and start driving additional desktop value to their customers right away. So with me today is Joseph Landis from Nerdio, and he's going to walk us through the basics of getting started with Windows Virtual Desktop.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you to Microsoft for having us at Nerdio participate in this first ever virtual Ignite. My name is Joseph Landis, as David said, and we are going to talk today about Windows Virtual Desktop and specifically WVD for managed service providers for partners whose primary clients are SMBs, or small and medium businesses. So let's jump right in. The first question that I want to tackle, and it's something that I'm asked all the time by partners, is what is Windows Virtual Desktop? So if I think about how to define Windows Virtual Desktop at its basic level, I like to say it's a set of technologies that allow any individual to stream his or her own Windows 10 desktop from any device in any location. That's an incredibly powerful value proposition, and certainly in this difficult time that we're all living through here around the world, I think it's a great value proposition for anyone who needs access to their own desktop, to their own files, to their own folders, but may not have the opportunity to really be at their desk that they're used to operating from. If you go a little bit deeper and you say, well, okay, Joseph, that's a good definition, but more specifically, tell me, what is Windows Virtual Desktop all about? So it's a set of technologies, and I would say maybe a licensing change from Microsoft that enables managed service providers to deploy virtual desktops in Azure. It's really four things. We're going to talk about each of these, but briefly, it's the ability to have multi-session Windows 10. It's the investment Microsoft has made in FS Logics for user profiles. It's a Microsoft-hosted Windows Virtual Desktop control plane, and it's vastly simplified licensing relative to the remote desktop services, the RDS world. If you are a partner, if you're a managed service provider, I'm sure you've been hearing about Windows Virtual Desktop. Certainly, many partners have been thinking about Windows Virtual Desktop now for a while. Windows Virtual Desktop actually emerged onto the scene in general availability in October 2019. Now, I know for all of us that seems like many, many years ago, but it was less than a year ago. We were inundated at Nerdio with questions, both prior to the release and after the release, about how does this really affect me as a managed service provider? How do I, as a Microsoft partner, benefit from this? And I think certainly any partner is able to ride the wave of cloud and adopt Windows Virtual Desktop for their practice. Many MSPs have really made the move in a very powerful way to Microsoft 365. In fact, more than 85% of the MSPs that we speak with have already either moved their clients to Microsoft 365 or are in the process. There's a huge opportunity for a partner to do the same with Microsoft Azure, and Windows Virtual Desktop is certainly one of those use cases. So if you're an MSP that's really thinking about, how can I be more efficient managing my practice? How can I create more monthly recurring revenue in the cloud? How can I enable my customers to work from any location, to maybe decentralize their office and be more flexible in terms of their working environment? Windows Virtual Desktop is for you. Now, I think to really understand and appreciate the power of Windows Virtual Desktop, you have to sort of look back and see what was the world like before Windows Virtual Desktop. And as I said, well, you don't have to go too far back because it's less than a year since Windows Virtual Desktop emerged onto the scene. And before Windows Virtual Desktop, if you are a partner and you wanted to deploy your SMB customer with a virtual desktop, you had to make use of RDS, Remote Desktop Services. This is a technology that has been around for 20 years. It emerged in Windows Server 2000. And there are some innate challenges, I would say, with RDS, certainly relative to Windows Virtual Desktop. For example, the underlying operating system that you use with RDS is Windows Server. And it's actually served up to a customer with what's called a desktop skin experience. So to the end user, to the person looking at their desktop, it looks like they're using a client operating system, but in truth, the underlying operating system is a version of Windows Server. And that in and of itself is not terrible. It's just that it presents issues. For example, application incompatibility. The user might think, the company might think, the managed service provider might think that any application that works with Windows 10 would therefore work with RDS because it looks like Windows 10. But when you stop and realize that the operating system you're using could be Windows Server, let's say 2016, and the application you're using is not compatible with that, that presents a challenge. Another challenge is around the concept of user profiles. You know, I'd like to describe the concept of user profiles as sort of like your passport, your driver's license. The user profile kind of tells the operating system who you are and what you're all about. And in the RDS world, being able to make use of user profiles is not something that is super easy. It's a little bit of a hack. You have to use things called UDPs. There's a lot of challenges with OneDrive support, with Outlook OST files, and many, many other things. In addition to that, Microsoft made the licensing incredibly complex. Not on purpose, it was just sort of the evolution of how things worked in the Windows Server world. So we'll talk in a few minutes about the big transformation when it came to licensing, but suffice it to say that licensing up correctly as a partner for an RDS solution is really a lot harder than with Windows Virtual Desktop. Now, there have been companies like Citrix and VMware that have come along and tried to really improve on Microsoft's base functionality, and those are great companies that have a lot to offer. But truly, most managed service providers who are servicing small and medium business customers, now they're not really using Citrix and VMware as much as one would think. It's a much more expensive solution. In many ways, it's a much more complicated solution than using native, in this case, Windows Virtual Desktop. So that's kind of the world that was before Windows Virtual Desktop. In truth, it's actually the world that is existing right now, because you can still use RDS, but truthfully, most partners are really moving in an aggressive way to Windows Virtual Desktop. So let's jump into the 4 areas that really make up Windows Virtual Desktop, the 4 investments I would say that Microsoft has made in Windows Virtual Desktop. And the first is multi-session Windows 10. So first and foremost, the underlying operating system in Windows Virtual Desktop is no longer Windows Server, it's Windows 10. So from an application compatibility standpoint, you get the best of what Windows 10 has to offer. And from a user experience standpoint, as Microsoft says, I think now it's more than 1 billion users are using Windows 10. That's a staggering number. More than 1 billion users on this earth are using Windows 10. So it's going to be a very familiar user interface, a very familiar operating system to the majority of people around the world. The second area around Windows 10 is what's called multi-session support. Now, in the Windows Virtual Desktop world, there are 2 concepts you have to familiarize yourself with. There's the concept of a personal desktop and a pooled desktop. Now, a personal desktop is a one-to-one assignment between the user and the Windows Virtual Desktop host or the virtual machine. And that is a perfectly legitimate way of setting up and running Windows Virtual Desktop, but it's also the most expensive way of doing it. You know, there's a great use case for it. Maybe there's an executive or a set of executives in the company that really need their own resources available to them at all times, then you might do a personal desktop. But the more traditional way, the more common way, the way that most partners who are serving SMB customers operate is with the concept of pooled desktops, the ability to run the operating system in a multi-session way where multiple small business users are leveraging the same Windows Virtual Desktop host at the same time. It dramatically decreases the cost of running virtual desktops and certainly Windows Virtual Desktop. So the majority of MSPs, that's how they are deploying Windows Virtual Desktop. And by Microsoft making Windows 10 as a multi-session operating system, it allows the partner to be able to do that. Finally, one can expect that the interoperability, the experience for end users across Microsoft products, will be very strong, right? So when you look at the most common Microsoft products that MSPs are using, it's Microsoft 365 is number one on the list. So Microsoft has done a great job making sure that Microsoft 365 is a first-class citizen in Windows Virtual Desktop, that the experience for the end user is great. Some people have come to us and said, well, Windows Virtual Desktop sounds great, but I'm sure, video is not that great. I'm sure that, maybe leading a webinar or participating in a webinar is not going to be that great. I'm here to tell you it's actually the opposite. The experience running Teams in Windows Virtual Desktop now is phenomenal. And Microsoft has done a great job making sure that the experience around Microsoft 365 is just super solid. Now, of course, we also talked about the ability to run Windows Virtual Desktop on any device anywhere. Now, many service providers who are calling on SMB customers are deploying Windows devices. But that's the beauty of Windows Virtual Desktop. It will literally run on any device. It could be a Raspberry Pi device, although that's not a very common scenario. It could be an iPad. It could be a Chromebook, a MacBook, a Surface Studio, a Surface Book, a Lenovo PC, a desktop PC, whatever it is, anywhere. And I want to highlight a case study, a small case study, to kind of tell you about the power of any device anywhere. At the beginning of the COVID pandemic, the unfortunate COVID pandemic, we were working with a managed services provider out in Denver, Colorado. And they had a client, which is an organization there, the E470 Tollway. And the E470 Tollway has a call center where they have users that are, using their desktop PCs to answer questions about maybe your toll bill or other things. Well, like many other businesses, they unfortunately had to shut down their operation, and they had to send all of their users home. But they needed to ensure business continuity. They needed to ensure that everything was working the right way. So they deployed Windows Virtual Desktop, and now their users went from a scenario where they were working in a cubicle with a desktop PC with a large monitor, which they couldn't really take home. It wasn't feasible to just pick that up and take it home. Now they were sent in their email an icon that they could click on, and all of a sudden their Windows 10 PC is available on any device that they have at home. So they've made their home office their actual office now. They've made their living room their office. They use any device they have, and they continue to be productive. This is the power of Windows Virtual Desktop, certainly in remote work scenarios, but there are many other companies around the world who have certainly benefited from Windows Virtual Desktop during this pandemic and otherwise. The second investment that Microsoft has made around Windows Virtual Desktop is this concept of FSLogix user profiles. So FSLogix was a startup like Nerdio. FSLogix was purchased by Microsoft a few years ago. FSLogix has great technology around managing user profiles. And what Microsoft did was they bought this company and they integrated it into Windows Virtual Desktop. And the way they did that was essentially by saying that the user's profile sits in Microsoft Azure. It sits in the cloud and it's stored on a file server. When the user logs in and comes along and says, hey, I'd like to, get access to my Windows 10 desktop, the user profile is automatically plugged into the operating system during the login process. So now the user sees all of her profile data along with the operating system. And then once the user signs off, the user profile then leaves, it's unplugged from the operating system and goes back to the file server. So as an MSP, as a service provider, you don't have to spend a bunch of time figuring out user profiles. It's baked into the product. It's built into the product. Microsoft has made the investment in making sure that the concept of user profiles is something that's not difficult, but is actually very easy for you to really bring your SMB customers into the cloud. It's a critical piece of Windows Virtual Desktop. Microsoft has also made the entire Windows Virtual Desktop control plane, how Windows Virtual Desktop works, much easier. And again, let's look at how it worked before Windows Virtual Desktop in the RDS world. So in the RDS world, in order to stand up a virtual desktop in remote desktop services in RDS, you had to basically put an individual role on an individual virtual machine and manage each of those roles. So things like the RDS connection broker to figure out where to land the individual session, the RD license server to make sure that the licensing was up to date, the RD gateway, the RD web. Each of these roles had to sit on an individual VM, which, by the way, you have to pay for and you have to manage as an MSP. How does it work in Windows Virtual Desktop? In Windows Virtual Desktop, all of these roles that you used to have to manage, Microsoft is now managing it for you in their control plane. Microsoft is running a service in Microsoft Azure called Windows Virtual Desktop, and it contains all of these roles in the service, the web access, the gateway, the broker, the diagnostics, but they're completely abstracted from you, the MSP. You don't need to go set this up. You don't need to figure out where to land all of these roles and how to license them and where to put them and how they all work. You don't have to manage them, and you don't even need to pay now for the virtual machines to host these different roles. So the level of simplicity for the service provider thinking of deploying their SMB customer with a virtual desktop has greatly been simplified by Microsoft with Windows Virtual Desktop. And by the way, Microsoft has, at least as of this recording, I believe it's 62 data center regions around the world. So imagine, you're the managed service provider. Microsoft is going to take this Windows Virtual Desktop service and eventually put it in every single data center region. They're not quite there yet at 100%, but they're in a lot of them, right? They're all over North America, in Europe, in Australia, New Zealand, in Brazil, and many other places. So, your only decision that you need to take is where is your customer located, and then sign up to run Windows Virtual Desktop in the closest data center to them to really reduce the latency of the individual's desktop to the Windows Virtual Desktop service. That's the power of Microsoft Azure. That's the power of betting on a hyperscale cloud provider like Microsoft, which has more data center regions than the other two major cloud providers combined. Okay, the fourth investment that Microsoft's made is, of course, simplifying the licensing around Windows Virtual Desktop relative to RDS. So again, with RDS, just to kind of go through it, and I know if you're listening to this and you've done this before, you probably understand what I'm talking about. It's a little bit painful. With RDS, you need to, again, place all these different RDS roles on virtual machines, which require licensing. Each end user who's going to have a virtual desktop requires a Windows client user cal, a client access license. Each RDS user requires an RDS user cal. And if you want to run Office with Office 365, or now I'm sorry, Microsoft 365, I sometimes forget, you need what's called shared computer activation. So that's a lot of things for you to kind of keep in mind. And when you talk to your cloud distributor like an Ingram Micro or a Pax8 or a Tech Data or Synex, you have to sort of go with this list of things that you need. How does it work with Windows Virtual Desktop? With Windows Virtual Desktop, you don't need any RDS or user cals. You don't need any RDS gateway or broker roles or Windows Server OS licenses. You need one thing that certainly we at Nerdio recommend, and I know our close partners at Microsoft recommend. You need Microsoft 365 Business Premium. Every MSP is licensing Microsoft 365. As I talked about before, more than 85% of MSPs are either providing Microsoft 365 or well down the path to do that. the specific SKU that you want, the hero SKU is Microsoft 365 Business Premium. Why? Because it gives you the entitlement to run Windows Virtual Desktop. Now, if you, for whatever reason, don't want to take us up on that offer of running M365 Business Premium, you can definitely use M365 Business Basic or Business Standard, but, and it's a big but, you're going to also have to license Windows 10 Enterprise alongside that. I'm not here to tell you which one, is more economically feasible for you based on what you own or what you may want to purchase in the future, but I'll tell you this, that probably, 95% of the deployments we've seen of Windows Virtual Desktop come along with Microsoft 365 Business Premium. It's simply the most cost-effective and the easiest way to make sure you have the entitlement, the permission, the right to run Windows Virtual Desktop in the cloud. So certainly when you speak with your cloud distributor or wherever you get Microsoft 365 and Azure from, definitely ask about Microsoft 365 Business Premium. Again, we've tried to make it a little bit easy for you in this slide because Microsoft changed the name of Office 365 to Microsoft 365, probably just to confuse all of us or to make things interesting for those of us who present these things all the time. But actually, in truth, it's a much easier way to remember it. It's all Microsoft 365 now, and Business Premium is what you want. I'd like to say a few words about Nerdio. At Nerdio, we are, again, a very close partner of Microsoft's. We're a SaaS company. We are all about empowering managed service providers to build successful cloud practices in Microsoft Azure and Windows Virtual Desktop. We've been at it now for a long time. We've been working with Microsoft since, I would like to say, before day one of Windows Virtual Desktop. For those trivia buffs among us here, before it was called Windows Virtual Desktop, it was called RDMI. So we were working with Microsoft in the RDMI days before they came up with a three-letter acronym instead of four, WVD, Windows Virtual Desktop. And on day one in October 2019, when WVD went general availability, we had it built into our flagship product, Nerdio for Azure. And what's Nerdio for Azure all about? So Nerdio for Azure, again, it empowers managed service providers to build a cloud practice in Azure. And we do four things very well. And I'll talk about it in the context of Windows Virtual Desktop because that's really what the session's all about. Most managed service providers, they say, gosh, I've gone and I've tried to figure out how to deploy WVD, but in the early days of WVD, I needed to know about PowerShell scripting. And with the latest release, it feels like there might be a little bit of an easier way to do it. So with Nerdio for Azure, we have automated the deployment of Windows Virtual Desktop down to about 2 or 3 hours. So if this is the first time that you've ever deployed a Microsoft Azure environment, let alone WVD, you would go to your cloud distributor and get your Azure and M365 Business Premium subscriptions, and you would plug them into our tool. And within about 2 to 3 hours, the entire customer environment would be built for you automatically. What do I mean by that? The domain controller, Active Directory, the networking, the LAN and DMZ, the storage, the backup, the file application and database servers if needed, the virtual desktops, the Microsoft 365 environment is built for you, and we connect back to the original environment and facilitate the movement of the bits into the new WVD environment. So everything you would have to do by hand, we have automated to really down to 2 or 3 hours. Most MSPs who try to do their first deployment, it could take them a few weeks, particularly if they don't have the resources in-house. With us, it's 2 to 3 hours. The second investment we've made is really helping to demystify the pricing around Windows Virtual Desktop. To do that, we've created something called the Nerdio Cost Estimator. And with the Cost Estimator, you answer some questions about the SMB customer that you want to deploy. And we spit out for you a per user, per month price for you to purchase Azure, Microsoft 365, and Nerdio from your friendly cloud distributor. So once you know how much it's going to cost you, you could put your managed services on top of it and your profit on top of it and confidently go to your customer and offer them a managed services contract based on Windows Virtual Desktop. So we demystify the pricing around WVD. The third investment that we've made is management. We know that once you have deployed your customer into WVD, that's when the hard work starts for your help desk, because your help desk is fielding questions all day long about, from customers. So, oh, I lost my password. I think I need a bigger virtual machine. Mary is joining my company. Can you set her up with Microsoft 365 and WVD? The hundreds of questions that come in on a day-to-day basis, your help desk needs to answer. So we've created a multi-tenant management portal called the Nerdio Admin Portal, where you can manage all of your customers in one single pane of glass. And more importantly, you could accomplish any task you want to accomplish in Windows Virtual Desktop in 3 clicks or less. So we've simplified the management of WVD. Finally, the fourth investment we've made is optimization. We have built into our product incredibly sophisticated but easy to use auto scaling. What is auto scaling all about? Imagine you're a partner and you have a 30-person doctor's office that you're managing the IT for. Every day at 6 p.m., the doctors, nurses, and staff, they all go home and they don't need access to their desktops. And then at 8 o'clock in the morning, they come back and they need to be productive. Wouldn't it be great if you, the partner, could tell Microsoft Azure when to turn off, when to turn on, when to expand the resources because there's more use, when to shrink the resources because there's less use? Well, that's the concept of autoscaling, where the system knows what's going on and the system adjusts based on the rules, the parameters that you set for the Windows Virtual Desktop environment. Again, this is something that for the average MSP is very hard to figure out yourself, but with the capabilities of Nerdio, we help you do this, and the end result is you save a lot of money on your Azure bill at the end of the month. You save a lot of money on Azure compute and storage associated with those meters spinning. So that's Nerdio for Azure. That's what we're all about. We're, again, a very close partner of Microsoft. We really help enable the WVD scenario, and we've done this with thousands of partners and many thousands of customers since the product came out. We build on top of the native WVD. There are others who take a different approach. They install these sort of custom clients onto your desktop. The problem with that approach is that if something happens to that client, nobody can access their virtual desktop. So we take the approach of native only. We build on top of the native Azure portal. We build on top of the native Azure calculator, and we add onto that with things like simple deployment, auto scaling, pricing automation, the ability to safely pilot and do a POC, desktop image management, host pool creation, and many other things. So if you are considering a WVD deployment, we certainly hope that you consider Nerdio on top of that. You know, at the end of the day, I believe that Microsoft has created something incredibly powerful for the ecosystem. It's really something that many people have been asking for a long time, and it's here. This isn't something that's coming. This is something that's here and has been here for a while. So if you're a partner and you play in this SMB space and you want your SMB customers to have the best experience possible, you should certainly consider Windows Virtual Desktop. If you have any questions about Nerdio or about WVD, we would love for you to contact us. Again, my name is Joseph Landis. My email alias, jlandis@getnerdio.com. I don't just put it up here because I think it's a nice thing to do. I put it up here because I want you to reach out to me. I want you to ask questions. We are here to help you and to support you and to help bring you to this world of Windows Virtual Desktop. You could also find us on our website, getnerdio.com, where you could find a free trial of our product, a free 30-day trial that will help you set up and get going, a free version of our cost estimator, free internal use licenses, and the Nerdio Academy, which has more than 700 articles and videos, all aimed at you, the MSP, to teach you how to build a successful cloud practice in Microsoft Azure. So I hope you enjoy the rest of Virtual Ignite this year. A very big thank you to Microsoft for inviting us to present, and we look forward to helping you be successful with Windows Virtual Desktop. Thank you so much.